Brian Sorensen, Mayor.
Eric Montiano, Fire Chief.
David Beeble, Public Works Director.
Did you want anybody from the gallery?
John Bridges,
Yeah.
Public Works.
Thank you.
Jack Wilson, Public Works. Brandon Yin, Public Works. Pete Shaw, Public Works. Phil Berkshire, Public Works. Tom Ross, Public Works. Travis Hill, Public Works. Joe Phillips, Public Works. Tom Perkins, Public Works. Vince Phil, Public Works.
Kathy?
Kathy Norman, Library Board. Dave Quinn, Library Board.
Garrett Erickson, Library. Tyler Gill, Public Works.
Mike Williams, Public Works. Carrie Harris, City Administrator. Larry Diamco, Public Library.
Derek Ranger.
Just as Deputy Finance Director.
Steve Solowski from City Development.
Kate Gruber, Finance Department.
Scott Miller, Community Media.
Thank you. Attorney.
Oh, we've had,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Charles.
Oops.
Perhaps we lost.
You lose.
No, I'm here. Chuck Adams, City Attorney.
And Scott, is Patrick on?
Come on.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Patrick Glenn, Carlson Detman Consulting.
Can you give us a little bit of background?
Oh, I'm sorry. You were just going through names. I thought you meant that, Ted. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know that I've had the opportunity to speak to most of you, regarding this project. And in terms of where we left this last week, I know we went through a pretty detailed presentation regarding process, methodology, findings. And I know at that time I had invited people, if they had questions, to route them through the city administrator's office so we could prepare for them. To the best of my knowledge, we've not received any such questions. And so I guess today I'm just here to help any way I can with questions that may not have been presented yet.
Sounds good. Thank you, Patrick. With that, we'll use that as our transition into item number 5, which is resolution number 24 of 2223, a resolution adopting updated wage classifications and steps as part of the 2022 City of Sheboygan Compensation Program for non-represented employees.
Thank you. I do have a short, it's 4 slides, so very short presentation. One's even a title slide. So if it is the committee's wish to have me just go over the very high level process and then some results and then what the proposed implementation is.
Sounds good to me.
So the process began last June when employees were asked to fill out job description questionnaires. They included filling out what job duties are required of them and assigning percentages to those job duties of what kind of filled their day. So after that, there were also questions about work environment, and also I think there was the 5 challenges of your job that you get throughout the course of your days or weeks here, and what kind of interaction you had in order to resolve those issues. Those job description questionnaires, or JDQs as we call them, were then reviewed and completed by supervisors. The supervisors put additional detail on there, including the minimum experience required, education, and also any licensing that is required of the position. Those, the final review, those were sent to Human Resources Department, and the final review was to be done by the Human Resources Department, and they were forwarded to the consultant, Carlson Detman. Carlson Detman then met with all the department heads to review in August and September, so that was to really develop an understanding of what the positions all did, and to make sure that if there's any quirks of the jobs here at Sheboygan compared to maybe some other municipalities, that those were discussed and taken into consideration during this process as well. All jobs were then evaluated based on the 5 buckets of criteria, I've been calling them. So it includes critical thinking, it includes decision-making, work environment, interactions, and that considers both inside and outside the organization, and then also the minimum requirements of that job, including experience and education, professional background, things of those nature. Then those criteria were rated, and every position was put and compared to benchmark jobs and market data to develop what is now presented as the draft wage scale. The Carlson-Detman then analyzed that for statistical confidence to make sure that the numbers actually did align with what they believe to be accurate. So just about the proposed wage scale, it was included in your agenda packet, so that includes all of the titles of the positions that were considered. These are all non-represented or non-union positions that were included. The scale is actually shifted. Instead of doing the 50th percentile, which would mean 50% below and 50% pay above what we would be as our control point, we did decide to propose that the control point actually is shifted upwards. So instead of the 50th, we're doing an average of the 50th and 75th percentiles. So we are trying to be a little more competitive in the market right off the bat, knowing that the data that is required of these compensation studies is backward-looking, and concerning the market we're in right now, where employees really have the upper edge, we wanted to at least assist the city with being a little more competitive. The steps range from the 90th percentile to 115% of the control point. Control point is step 5. The steps increase 2.5% from 90% to 100%. So it allows people who come in the door to at least get to the control point a little quicker. And then from the 100% to 115%, each step increases by 1.25%. The intention is also that every year the scale itself is adjusted for a cost of living. So not only would individuals get that step increase, but the steps would be adjusted for COLA as well. And here is some information on the proposed implementation. We are looking to have every employee go to the next step on their grade. So if an individual is currently between a step 8 and a 9, for example, they would be placed at step 9. No one will be going backwards, even if that's the closest step to them. And any employee that has at least 5 years of employment with the city will be placed at a minimum step 5. So if there's an individual who's between a step 2 and a step 3 currently, they will be, and they have 5 years of experience here at the city, they will be placed at a step 5. They would not be put at a step 3. That's to at least take into consideration some tenure and experience here at the city. This information was in the memo that was attached in the packet, but these are just some numbers for reference. The individuals that will be moving to step 1, that's 40 of the 218. That means that they were not even on their current pay grade as presented. So they would have been not even on a step at all at this point. And there are 47 individuals that would be moved to a step 5 because they have at least that 5 years of service to the city. So 47 people will automatically go to step 5 instead of 1, 2, 3, or 4. There are also 11 individuals that on this pay scale would be considered over the max step. We haven't had a final discussion on how that would what would happen to those, but the usual circumstance, I guess, puts them kind of at a red line, they call it a red circle, and they're at that place until the scale catches up to them. Some individuals, it will be just this year that they need the scale to be adjusted for COLA, and they would get that adjustment 1/1 of 2023. We are looking at a July 10th implementation date. This allows us to implement with the budget that we have available to us this year. $400,000 was all that was set aside for this compensation study implementation for 2022. So by doing July 10th, we actually, if you look at the annual cost of implementation, the $674,000, the $400,000 allows us to do that. But then also the seasonal individuals that are on the pay scale now would also be adjusted, and those individuals were not included in that number. So there is some amount that still needs to be added into that number. And I will say this, for 2023's budget, it will be quite tight because we have to not only come up with the other half of this year, but then we're hoping to adjust employees both up a step and that COLA adjustment. So that is the proposal that's in front of you today. There was consideration and the math was done to see how it would be to move an individual to the step that matches the tenure here. So let's say if a person has 14 years of experience, what would it take to get them to a step 14? And the cost of that was near $1.2 million. So we went with a somewhat in the middle implementation proposal because it's going to be tough affording that already. And $1.2 million is just kind of unheard of in the budget world at this moment. I'm available for any questions, and obviously Patrick's on it as well.
Thank you. Questions, comments from committee members? Alder Flicky-Panis.
Thank you very much. Am I understanding that?
There we go. Charles Adams.
Okay, thank you very much after the technical difficulties. Am I understanding that
You're in code. I don't-
no one in this pay structure will lose any dollars that they currently have, even if they are above the pay grade? And I think there were 11.
Correct.
Okay.
We are not proposing any decrease in anyone's current pay.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Any other questions or comments? Administrator Wolf.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give everybody an understanding that I want to call out Caitlin, Director Krieger, on the exceptional work that has been done. We did have HR involved, and we do have a shortage in HR. We've had a lot of fluctuation and changes, but we also have a consultant that is helping the city part-time to help us through this journey. This journey has taken a long time, as we all know. I brought this up originally back in 2020 when I first came on board, saying that we, the city, need to take a look at our wage study. We had multiple wage, what do you call that, Caitlin? Wage adjustments documentation. DPW had their own wage scales. City Hall non-rep had their own additional wage scales. We had a double A. I mean, we've made so many adjustments over the years that there were a lot of discrepancies. So we'd have people in similar positions and on different pay grades. So this process, if you were to think of it, is very, very complicated because we have 218 employees. We have over 100 different positions. That's why the JDQs, the job description questionnaire was so critical. The problems that we identified over the years was the fact that certain positions, depending on maybe departments or personnel or maybe the job description at that time, positions were adjusted according to the person and not the position. The spirit of this was, knowing the complexity, was to look at the position and not the person. It has nothing to do with the people that are in the position. It has to do with the position itself. This, in the spirit of this, we really wanted to start with a good structure so that we can build on it and grow with it and improve it in the future. We did not realize the significance of where we are today. And I'm honest, and I can say, I did not believe that we were so far behind. We have employees throughout the city, and again, I have said that this is a city project throughout the city, that we're looking at all departments equally, and we're not trying to pick on any individual position throughout this process. We're trying to be as balanced and level as possible, knowing that we have valued employees throughout the city, and we want to take care of our employees internally as much as possible so that we can continue to bring in additional team members in the future. Obviously, it's very frustrating when you hire a new person and they come in at a high wage, and we've been an employee for a long period of time, and we go, well, how come this person's making as much as I did that I'm making now today? It's very disheartening. We did not realize that we have employees within the city that have been held back for many years, and we sit there and we go, why did that happen? How did that happen? We sit there and we go, we have an annual review. How did that person get overlooked year over year? So we identified a lot of discrepancies and some missteps, as I call it. When we make a mistake, or when I make a mistake, I call it a misstep. It's not necessarily intentional. It's just that something was overlooked. This program that I hope that everybody understands, and it is going to take, we can't make everybody happy. I mean, let's face it, this is government. Nobody's ever going to be happy for everything. But it's a good start. We literally took 2 wage scales, we've combined it. There's 24 different levels. We've categorized it according to data that the Carlson-Detman has pulled together. And if there's questions on that, we can either watch it online independently and watch the multiple presentations, the short version or the long version. We can also try to understand the fact that this is data that is driven, and it's data that looks back 3 years. Now, I can tell you that I'm not happy with 21, 2020, and 2019. But I also have said in council that I recommend that in the near future that we do this again and do an update, right? Because we are in an ever-changing environment. Economics are different, supply chain is different. We had the Great Resignation, we're coming out of COVID, we're coming out of a pandemic. We have a lot of difficult situations happening, not just for the city of Sheboygan, but every company out there, whether you're a small mom and pop shop that have employees and you're trying to struggle to get people to work in your restaurant or business, to large billion-dollar companies that struggle every day to get employees because there's just not enough people out there. We have to use technology. We have to be able to embrace that we need to work smarter, not harder. And there's going to be some difficult decisions. The hardest part about this is please understand that the city brought this forward, that we said as a part of improving our employees and taking care of our employees, that we needed to look at this. We could have easily just said, oh, let's throw 3% at everybody and leave it as is. But we're not doing that. We're actually recommending that this new structure, this new program, is the beginning of fixing what we've identified. We don't have the money, as Director Krieger said, $1.2 million. If we had that, I think there'd be a lot of other things happening in the world too. But we've lost money year over year. We can't raise taxes like people think and believe. We have state guidelines and state statutes, and I'm still learning about all of that, but we have levy limits, we have expenditure restraints, and we can't just throw more fees out there. The state has reduced that ability. We can't go fundraise. Nobody wants to pay taxes, and let alone I can't do a brat fry and say, hey, would you mind throwing us a few dollars because we'd like to do some wage increases? It would be pretty upsetting. We've all been through some very difficult times. We had, Act 10 back in the day. There's been a lot of changes. Employees went from many benefits that were included in their wages and benefits to having to contribute to certain benefits. These are things that in the private industry, which is where I came from, those are just day-to-day things that are very common. And we're still in very good shape from my perspective and from the data that we've seen. So as an example, one of the pieces that we did not look at was our actual benefits as far as like our health insurance. Some people can say, well, our health insurance costs too much, as an example. We are in the 82 percentile, 82. That's a very high number. So one of our HR generalists, actually, her husband works for the city, not the city, the Sheboygan Area School District, and we are much better. We also have data from the county. We are much better. Our actual insurance provider has provided us information to show us that we are in the 82 percentile. You don't want to be better than that, because that means that you're paying way too much for benefits that you don't use. But we can lower our benefits and reduce the cost to the constituent or to the employee. But then what happens? Those that need it don't have those benefits, and it costs them significantly more. The issue is it all comes down to wages and benefits, and I get that. We're trying with this program to roll out a better program that's going to help us today to fix it tomorrow. It's a journey. I said this back in 2020, whatever we come up with, we will have to do it in a phased piece, in a program. We'd like to get to a performance base so that those that are behind in years, that we can move them up as quickly as possible, because we have a lot of great employees here, because that's where we are today. Look at what we're doing with what little bit we have. And we're not hiding that. We're saying thank you so much for being an employee here. Thank you so much for taking care of our community. Thank you so much for doing as much as you do with what little bit you get. But this program is to help us, to help you, and it's going to take time. We can throw this out, not a problem. But that means that what you have today is what you're going to have tomorrow. We can embrace this and we can say, hey, it's a good start, it's a good platform, let's go with it. Let's work with, the department heads, let's work with finance department, let's work with budgeting, let's work with the alders, let's embrace what we need to do, and let's move forward. And how can we afford all of this? Because let's face it, we all have budgets at home, and you can only go so far with the dollars we have. It's the same thing with the city. We only have so many dollars. So I ask everybody that works on this, looks at this, and says, you know what, I may not like where everything landed today, but we have data to show why it's there. And if we're going to get into the tweaking and popping and moving and adjusting, that's where things were, and it was not accurate, it was not correct. And the point is, we don't want to lose any of our valued employees. We want to be able to bring more valuable employees on board. We want to grow our city and take care of what do we do best, and that's the service of our constituents. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope that people ask questions. And again, I just want to say, Caitlin, thank you so much. This was not in your wheelhouse. From a financial perspective, you and I have been working diligently on this. From an HR perspective, Caitlin stepped up to help out in a lot of different areas. But we have had influence, and we've had involvement from HR perspective on this, and there is an appeals process. So right now we have to first have a program to even appeal. So, Caitlin?
If I may, I was just going to touch on the appeals process really quickly, since we do have quite a few employees here. And Patrick's on the phone. I'm using actually his slide from a presentation he gave, just so that, to show that on the PowerPoint. Can you put it? So we, first, before anything, we have to actually adopt the pay scale so that there is something to appeal. So without council's action, there really is no changes to the scale. So without that, that's why the appeals process happens after the fact. Yeah, I've got it up here, but I'm not sure why it's not coming up. So then there is the pre-appeal portion, which is just saying that, I'm feeling that my position is not where it should be, and they can request the rating levels for their classification from Carlson Detman. So that's actually giving them data to explain why they got placed where they're placed. Then there's information sharing, and Patrick, you can jump in if I say anything you would like to.
You're doing just fine here. You're doing fantastic.
Okay, so then there's the information sharing piece, where Carlson provides actually the city the information of all the employees that had concerns or questions or disagreed with where they were placed on the scale. Then there is the formal appeal process, which after receiving and reviewing the information, if the employee still disagrees and says, well, I don't think this was taken into consideration, or maybe a license was missing from a JDQ, so that could make a big difference. So then the employee is responsible for actually outlining the specific areas where their appeal is based off of. From that gets turned into the supervisors, and the supervisors just review it to make sure that, yes, they agree with what the employee has said. From there, it goes actually back to Carlson Detman, who does a formal review and reviews all the documentation and determines if there was something missed, or if any reconsideration can be done based on what was provided. From there, Carlson Detman actually provides the city a written recommendation on the basis of the appeal to say if they would recommend approval or rejection, and also giving some information on why they recommend it that way. From there, it would actually come back to Finance and Personnel, is my presumption, if that's the direction I'm given, that the adjustments that are recommended or even rejected would come back, and so that the Finance and Personnel Committee could have that review, make adjustments to the scale prior to truly the final version of the wage scale that will be implemented. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Alder Perella?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few concerns, although I agree completely with Administrator Wolf that standardizing the pay grades, the pay scale, I mean, it's ideal and it should be done, no doubt about it. However, my concerns are, first of all, I guess that my mind is the way it works. I would have liked to have some comparative data. So what is that is going to be changed into what? Because for me, I'm sorry for that, I apologize, but I cannot, when I see a number, a grade number, I don't know which current positions belong to that grade and what is the change going to be. And I know it's a lot of work to do that, but I feel that that's what we should have been given, or we should be given, to have to wrap our brain around the change, right? So that's the first one. And again, I know it's a lot of work, and I actually want to echo Administrator Wolf about how good Director Kruger did. So I want to emphasize that as much as I can. But still, that doesn't mean that I'm satisfied with the data I have to make a decision. The second thing is, and forgive me for that, I have to be blunt, to see that there is a minimum wage below $15 is a little hard for me. I mean, I look around and we all know that there are positions in many private restaurants around that are paying adults entry levels with $15. So that doesn't convince me much. Third thing is, I would like to know of looking at the diagram, it looks to me that the more you go up in the scale, the more beneficial this change is to the employees. Is that right, or it's my misinterpretation of the diagram?
I think I can jump in and at least answer, and Patrick can expand if he'd like. But I do think the comparison of where people are currently versus where they would be on this scale would maybe demonstrate that a little better, because I know that there are people who really won't have much movement, even though on the diagram it looks like there's a lot of movement. Some positions are already within that band. So it's not that they're getting a huge increase compared to others, but I think that comparison data would help. So I can definitely compile that. There was one other individual who requested it, but I don't have it available to just send, so it would be compiling something.
Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up question if I can, or I can wait.
I'm going to jump over to Alder Ackley. And we can...
Please do.
Okay.
Go ahead, finish.
It's actually a different one, though. Technically, I was wondering, are we asking the departments heads and directors to weigh in on their, to give their feedback on this before? I mean, did we get feedback or approval from the department heads and directors already?
Several weeks ago, not only did the department heads meet with them back in August and September, but in May, Administrator Wolf and I and the HR consultant from who's helping HR, was in a couple of those meetings where we actually presented the draft scale that's been changed. It's been changed a little bit from what was originally presented to the department heads. It was an opportunity for them to say any glaringly wrong possible issues or concerns that they thought were inaccurate could be at least addressed before it was published. So we did meet with every department head before it went online and got into the public space. I will say some things were adjusted and some things were not. So if it was not adjusted, it was mostly because based on the data that we got in that moment with the short window of time that we had, it was not enough to say that it was in either management or Carlson Detman's position at that moment to change it. It would be ideal to have it go through more of that appeals process to make sure that we are following the data and things from the market accordingly.
There was one question regarding the percentages, in terms of higher up in the organization. I think the only thing in terms of the structure itself is the way it's built is that, there's a control point, the midpoint, however you want to describe it, and then the minimum based on a percentage above and below. So it would be 90% below that control point for each job and 115% above that control point, which percentages for higher wages mean greater dollars. And that's just the way that it would be with any pay structure, public or private, that we would do. So the answer is yes, there's a wider range of pay. But in many cases, the presumption is that for some of those positions, you might be maybe not right now in the immediate marketplace, that you might hire some of those classifications at a lower level and allow them a larger range of growth. And again, some of that larger wage ranges are also necessary for some of those positions where there's a natural or semi-natural progression, through the law enforcement ranks, through the fire ranks, or public works, or those sorts of things, that making certain that you've got competitive enough compensation that as those employees move through your organization, or as you bring new employees into the organization, hopefully they have, similar public sector type experience, that you're able to provide a competitive range of pay for those positions.
Thank you. Elder Ackley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that compensation can be kind of a contentious issue, but I wanted to just, clarify and make sure that, our lowest wages really are comparable, because that seems to be a problem. Everybody's saying, well, you can go work at a different place for, higher pay. But the problem is if this is comparable with other cities as well as ours, then what can we really do if we have finite resources to begin with? We're trying to make a starting point. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that is a starting point, but that's not necessarily a sticking point. So these people do have the opportunity to grow within their positions and equalize, correct?
Alder Ackley.
So when you talk about the lower, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Patrick, basically what we're doing is, as an example, when we talk about the lower entry areas, these are part-time positions, and the control point is technically at $14.12. For, as an example, a page, a cleaner is at $15.26 control point. DPW seasonal is at a control point of $16.42. Now, again, if we look at years of service, some of our seasonals they come back year over year. The pages, I believe, the majority of the pages, and I would have to look or consult with Garrett. They have more tenure than 5 years, the majority of them. So they would be above, and if we look at the actual pay grades and pay scales for different departments, again, there's only 11 positions out of 218 that are capped out the majority of the positions are seeing an increase in their pay grade. And again, we heard it loud and clear. As an example, the pages were brought up in many, many meetings throughout this process that it needed to be above 13, if not 15. And we did hear that loud and clear. And Patrick, if you want to jump in on that.
I was just going to weigh in on that.
Yep, please weigh in.
So, in response to that one particular classification, there was a handful of others as well, that last summer we actually conducted a survey throughout the state of Wisconsin inquiring about those very classifications. And we had I want to say we had 30, 40 or so communities respond to the survey. And just with the classification of page, we had 16 responses because some of those organizations were counties, and obviously not every county. I think there's only a handful of counties that actually have libraries. But the wage that came back, even at, whether it's a starting, average, and I'm just going to round here for the sake of our conversation, the starting average pay, is about $10.50. And then the average maximum rate of pay for those classifications is $12. And so in terms of the structure that you are considering, there's substantial room for growth for those classifications if you figure that their starting rate of pay at that lower level is above the maximum pay reported in our survey, and they have an additional almost $3.50–4 of wage growth beyond that. So I mean, I understand the commentary regarding 15 without a directive of the client to engage that. Right now the minimum wage is $7.25. I understand all the conversations. I know precisely what organizations are doing that, in absence of a legislative minimum wage, businesses have taken it upon themselves to move that direction. But in terms of these classifications, the data was very clear. And I think what you're offering for these classifications is highly competitive as it relates to the marketplace.
Thank you, Patrick.
Elder Flicky-Paneski.
Thank you. I've heard the commentary. We have to avoid tweaking so that we don't get in trouble and end up with the same conglomeration that we came into this wage study with. Is there a set plan every year, every 2 years to revisit this, to recalibrate it, to come back to council and say, we've reevaluated, maybe this is the year we take 15 as a minimum, or maybe this is the year that we can go 1.35 instead of 1.25. What's the process and what's the procedure for us to not tweak, but for us to continuously monitor this particular program?
If I might, may I weigh in?
Go ahead.
So I guess my recommendation, this is something that we would recommend to all clients, is in normal times. And normal, you can define whatever it is. I just know that we're not in normal times right now as it relates to the marketplace, is that we would recommend to clients that every 3 to 5 years, I'm going back to measure the marketplace. And in the intermediary times, also if jobs change, having those reevaluated for placement on the schedule. Given what we're dealing with right now, part of that we're trying to calibrate with, the higher competitive nature of the proposed structure, but it might be advisable for organizations to go out every 2 to 3 years until this labor market subsides. I think we're all hopeful that inflation is going to let up a little bit. I think we hope that the labor market is going to ease up, but the reality is that our population, if you look at the data and statistics, our population isn't growing the way it should. And our largest generation, the baby boomer generation, is continuing to exit just as we had long planned for them to do. But the replacement of those workers is going to be incredibly tough. So it might be every 2 to 3 years that you might want to go out and measure the marketplace. Not a comprehensive overhaul of the structure, but more making certain that you are maintaining a competitive balance with that marketplace.
So if we go out every 2 to 3 years, does that process look like this process looked like, or is it different, or is it a variation, or do we do the whole
I would say a variation. That, in terms of reconstructing the hierarchy, our goal is that once we get through the initial phase and then get through an appeals or classification review phase, that we've got a pretty locked in organizational hierarchy that should only be changed if you have new positions. If somebody leaves and you shuffle job duties around amongst positions, you can make certain that those jobs are in the correct classification. But an update would not be the comprehensive review. I would only recommend that once every decade or so, if you can at all avoid it. But sometimes, we go back at it, 8 years down the road. Sometimes, if organizations keep everything up to date, it would be 15 years. But in terms of the market update, it would be going through and looking at all of those benchmark jobs that we looked at this time through, and any additional benchmarks that we might have data for at that time. We're constantly updating our surveys with new and emerging jobs, and as well as the surveys that we purchased from the marketplace, that going back through and then testing the competitiveness and then giving you options, that if you're just fine, maybe there's only a handful of positions you need to address, or maybe your entire structure, just based on either lack of putting, additional money on an annual basis as a percentage to keep up with the market, or other reasons, you might need to readopt. But yeah, it would come up with a whole host of options, but it would absolutely be smaller in scale than what we're dealing with right now.
Thank you.
May I add a few comments?
By all means.
Thank you, Chair. Patrick, if you could just touch on the fact that Director Krieger had also pointed out that the standard out there, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is the 50 percentile. We, the city, in presenting this program as a starting point, we had taken it up to an average between the 50 and the 75th percentile. Again, part of the reason we did that was in the data that we had seen, we were very close to market. Whether we agree, disagree, however we want to look at that, we were close to market. It wasn't that, the severity wasn't there. The severity, if I'm saying this correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was the fact that we had job positions at on the wrong pay grades. We had positions that people had not moved up the scale. That's where the discrepancy is. So it's not that some of the pay grades were off, people were in the wrong pay grade per the position. The other piece is the fact that we are taking it to in between the 50th and 75th because of the fact that the past 3 years are very traumatic and a lot of changes. We have the Great Resignation, we have the COVID, we have all kinds of excuses and issues that have really created a lot of turmoil, and that's really driving a lot of flux, and we're trying to at least make some adjustment, knowing that we can't get necessarily where we want to be, and we don't really know where we need to be in the future. And it's going to take a couple of years realistically, and I'm a realist, to be able for us to figure out how we're going to afford all of this. Let's go back to the $1.2 million to get everybody where they should be. Our goal is that we roll this out as stated, and then in 2023, we would be moving everybody up one step, hopefully. And my plan and Director Krieger's plan and our HR department is going to be tasked that we're going to have a performance-based improvement program so that we can move people up, again, hoping that we can afford all of this because we need to move people up as quickly as possible. And I agree with Alder Flicky-Beneski. We need to be assertive in, is this program accurate today, but is it going to be accurate in 2 or 3 years? And we need to review it. And I've said that in the past, that this needs to be something that is reviewed on a consistent basis because our number one asset is our employees and we need to take care of them. Thank you.
Alder Perala.
I have just one more concern about the implementation, and I would like to have Patrick's opinion on that as well. in your experience, implementing a change of this type will what's the degree of impact on the work needed from the HR perspective? Is this going to be very, require a huge commitment from the HR perspective? And of course, where I'm leading to is this the best time to implement right now this change due to the fact that our HR department is understaffed?
I guess I can weigh in. I can't speak to Caitlin or Todd's workload because they're the ones that will ultimately deal with that. But in terms of the implementation in and of itself, one of the things that we turn over to each of our clients is an implementation or costing spreadsheet that helps based on the option chosen, where does each employee fall in the scale. And I know that Caitlin has done a tremendous amount of work making certain that that data remains up to date. And so in terms of the actual implementation, I think that's more of a payroll function than it is a human resources function. The one thing, don't misunderstand me, that there's, with any new program or policy, there are invariably questions, and, I would presume as well, working through policy revisions to make sure that the policies align with the plan, that workload I cannot attest to. So but in terms of, where people fall in the elbow grease to kind of get those numbers of where people land, I think a lot of that's already been done and just subject to changes of employees coming and going.
And I can expand on that. Finance is in charge of payroll, so we have we have an awesome staff in finance that is ready to jump in and actually implement this. So the payroll piece is actually probably going to be one of the easier parts of this whole project.
That's nice to hear.
Spend money.
Wow.
Settle down.
Alder Flicky Paneski.
I would just like to say publicly, that's the nicest thing I've heard today. So I am delighted that the implementation will be able to go smoothly through finance. And I guess I would also like to publicly say thank you to Caitlin on behalf of the council, because we know you've been wearing two hats through all of this. So thank you very much. And it's just nice to know that as it moves forward, you'll get a breather. Appreciate that.
And if I can just say one more thing, just because there are a lot of employees here, there will be more communication coming out. I think everyone's been getting used to my all city user email chains that I start. And so we are going to be sending out both the links to the finance and the council meeting where there was the in-depth presentation on how this all came to be. But then I will also be sending out information regarding the appeals process so everyone has clear direction when that time comes.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from committee members? If not, we'll be looking.
There's David B.
David in corner.
behind the podium.
Director Beeble.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of questions since many of my employees for the Department of Public Works are here this evening. It's true that this process has taken a long time. And it's true that we had some meetings in August. Those meetings, however, were virtual. They weren't together with the consultant. There wasn't data to review with the consultant, to review details. It was more general questions about how's your department? What do some of these positions do? Is this position, should it be classified more as an equipment operator versus a maintenance worker? So there was a lot of generalities and general description. So I just want to make sure that I don't want to be portrayed as endorsing something where, we haven't had the full amount of time and due diligence with all the data. Now, I keep hearing we need a plan to be passed. The plan we have in front of us We keep hearing that it has to be passed. Why can't we get it? We've had this time. I have concerns in the department that have been raised that I've been trying to vet and trying to get more information on and trying to get things. And this is happening now that the pay is public. I'm getting more information, and what would it take? Why can't we get it right before we have to pass it and have an appeals process? Why don't we get it right and then pass it? Yes, there still may be problems in appeals, but at least what I have in front of me, I have at least 8 different positions that really need to be addressed that I'm afraid that if it goes to an appeals process, it's going to be dragged out and not addressed because it's passed. So I just want to share that with the committee, and I fully support redoing the pay plan, and I'm not against that at all. And Todd and Caitlin have been doing an amazing job in terms of what they've had, given there's no HR, there's hardly any staffing to help them through this process. But I don't want, we got this May 20th. We had a finance and personnel on May 24th with another virtual presentation. We had a virtual presentation last.
I was going to say everybody got to kick the cat, but that's not politically correct. But everybody got a chance to describe their job and how it worked and according to criteria that the consultant set before us. So there may be discrepancies. You might have caught the handful that there are. I'd kind of like to hear Patrick weigh in on this one.
I guess a couple things. There was a lot in the director's statement, and I guess first of all, in terms of with the department heads, our work, is our work between the public sector and private sector is so remarkably different that I hear this, and I spent my entire career before this in the public sector, but in most cases, when we are working on a compensation structure, working with a private sector client, that the employees are barely aware that we are there, let alone in terms of what's being baked into this and the various departments, weighing it. It's usually, like I said, a human resources professional, maybe some subject matter experts from time to time. So for us, when we do sit down with the departments, I think it's incredibly important that we have the conversations that the director was describing regarding, are we viewing the jobs correctly? Are we, here's what we're seeing, or here's what we're not seeing in some cases. And so trying to align those jobs appropriately is exactly what I believe we were asked to do in those meetings and trying to carry that forward. In terms of the structure itself, it really is up to each organization as it relates to, how many cooks do you allow in the kitchen? Because it really can go off the rails pretty quickly the more people you get in the room and weighing in. And I understand everybody wants this done and wants it done correctly. We want it done, and we want it done correctly. The question regarding the appeals process, I would have to imagine, and if I were to estimate on most projects, we have responded to more questions regarding individual classifications in the finalization of this structure than I have probably on my last 2 or 3 projects combined. That's not a complaint. It's probably more of a statement that Caitlin and Todd have been incredibly engaged with this process and bringing it home. But it's always that balancing act, and I always draw the equivalent when we talk about our appeals process. It's very much like a court case. It's probably an apples to elephants comparison, except for you can't appeal a court case until it's been decided because there's nothing to appeal. The same thing I would say, aligns with the compensation structure that we've dealt with the one-off situations, but in terms of appealing or requesting a review of the classification, that could be a never-ending process where we finish one wave and then we go to another wave, then we go to another wave. So it's a matter of when do we say that we are done for purposes of trying to revisit and clarify maybe those few issues that we still have remaining. So it's a difficult process at best in the public sector, I think, whoever said it, I think is right on, that there's not much more personal than pay. And so we understand that it causes a lot of emotions, which is why we try to stay as rooted in the data as humanly possible.
Thank you, Patrick. If I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I totally understand where Director Biebel is coming from, and I know that we've talked about with all of the department heads and with alders and leadership, and that we sit and we look at this process and we look at the program and the complexity of it. But we also have to have faith in the vetted vendor that we brought in, Carlson Detman, and how they work with so many municipalities, and they work with so many other industries and different comparables, and this is what they do. This is how they put, bread on the table, per se. If we're, part of the problem is where we've been in the past is we had so much tweaking that we didn't actually have a program anymore. And thus, I think we've identified that, and we have so much data on that, and that's why we're looking at $1.2 million to correct things, because we weren't running the program that we had correctly. We talk about, and I hear that we've done some wage reviews in the past, but we can't find data on that. We can't find information to say, where did we come up with that? We could have just threw a couple of darts at the wall and said, hey, here, this is what we're going to do. And we, like I said earlier, we could have said, you know what, let's do a 3% and make everyone happy. Let's do a 4% and make everyone happy. Everybody is still not where they should be. The scope of this, and I do hear Director Biebel loud and clear, and other department heads, because if we try to make everyone happy, we're going to make nobody happy. We still have to figure out how we can get this done. How can we actually afford this and keep the employees that we have that we value so much? So it is a start. It isn't perfect. Nobody said it is. We're going to continue to have people, whether it's directors complaining about either their positions, employees complaining about their positions. But let's look at this again. If $1.2 million has to fix it, where are we going to come up with it? We struggle in coming up with a yearly budget, year over year. We struggle in keeping all of our different departments happy when it comes to capital improvements and borrowing. We cannot borrow money to run the city. You don't pay your bills at home with a credit card and then pay your credit card with another credit card. That's not how it works. We are doing our due diligence to take care of our number one asset, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take work from our department heads. It's going to take work from our employees. It's going to take work and support from our mayor, from our council, because it's going to be very difficult. And only together can we work on this and be successful. But part of this is that we have to understand that we are trying, the spirit of this is we are trying to fix something that's broken. And if we sit and we try to hit 100%, we're going to end up doing exactly what we had before. And that's tweak it and tweak it and tweak it, trying to put people where we feel that they're best appropriate when it comes to the person and not the position. And I'm sorry, but when we looked at this, this is positions, not people. And I'm sorry, there's only 11 people that are capped out of 218 people, not looking at any of the seasonals, correct me if I'm wrong. We are looking at 11 that are capped out. That doesn't mean that they're stuck there forever. They will get COLA in the future, cost of living adjustment, just in case. I'm not supposed to use acronyms. But the point is that this is a start. City of Sheboygan is just like any other municipality. We have unique positions that will need some tweaking. But if we're going to tweak everything, we're still never going to hit where we should be starting. And we're never going to make everyone happy. So if we're going to sit here and say, well, let's try to make everyone happy, we're not going to be able to afford it, then we might as well stay where we are. And like I said, throw 4% at everybody. And again, you look at all of the dollars, there's only 11 people out of 218 that are not going to see any technically increases. Every other employee will see some type of an increase. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director. Any additional questions?
Alder Perrella.
I actually want to thank Director Biebel for voicing his concerns, because that's exactly the feedback I was looking for from the department's heads and the directors, because of course they have the pulse also of they have the unique perspective that I cannot have. It seems to me that it's not necessarily neither the study nor the plan of standardizing the pay grades. It's more the timing, and I feel that I don't grasp the whole change, and I don't feel comfortable making a decision. Now, this can be just personal, but I'm hearing the Director Biebel saying somewhat the same, that he doesn't feel that the timing is right. He's saying that he needs, and tell me if I'm wrong, Director Biebel, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that the timing and the need for looking at this longer is more the point, not the study itself.
Thank you. Alder Flicky-Beneski.
Yeah, I would ask my colleague, if it's not the study itself and it's the timing, what benefit is it to postpone the implementation if it wasn't the study? You kind of lost me in there. And truly, we are short-staffed, to say the least, in human resources. That's probably the biggest thing. If hindsight was 20/20, and it always is, we would have called a halt to it when we didn't have an HR director, waited 6 months, picked it up again. That's not what happened. The study went forward, and I don't think the numbers are going to change if we wait, if we postpone it. Meanwhile, our employees who could have had a raise now won't have had a raise while we deliberate yet again for 3 to 6 months. So I am in favor of passing it the way it is and making sure that we don't, A, tweak, and 2, we revisit this plan so that we have input moving forward way ahead of when we need to have the vote, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Eckley.
I agree with thank you, sorry. I agree with Bert. I feel like we've got to start somewhere. I would be concerned about people who are, not being paid enough. They need to be equalized with everybody else in all fairness. I feel like we do need to move forward. We need to have some sort of starting point. We can come back, we can review this, we can look at other things, but really, we need to do something, because we need to look at all the employees as a group, not specific groups of people or certain people. We need to look at everybody. So.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Or department heads? Question?
Come up to the podium, please.
For this meeting, we were going to limit commentary discussion on the actual question at hand to committee members and department heads. Just don't want to undermine the process that we are going to be establishing before we have established it. Alder Perrella.
I just want to reply in part to other person, Filippi Peneschi, because I don't want her to get lost. She said that I lost hers. And so the point is that, for example, I would have loved, I actually made this comment last time already. Distinctly, I remember I asked, I really would like to have a table comparing the positions before and the position after. And I know it is a lot of work. So now I feel even bad because I'm asking this, because I know that we are understaffed, and I don't want to be a burden. So is this the best condition? No, I don't think this is the best condition for me. So I have to compromise on my integrity of thinking, because I know that we don't have the workforce to actually, as I said, I feel bad. I don't want to ask for more information. Director Kruger said, I can provide you with information. Yes, but we have to make a decision tonight. So there is a discrepancy there in the timing, and I'm not convinced, although I completely agree on the fact that we need adjustments. And what I meant with it's not a study is that I'm not criticizing the quality of the data and the work of the study.
Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We can pull that together. I guess the question that I have for this, obviously, Special Finance Committee is that information can be pulled together. We can do that for this committee. We can get that sent to you fairly quickly, and I say that tongue-in-cheek so I don't get slapped because somebody's going on vacation, which is greatly deserved, and hopefully she comes back. But anyway, the issue is, even when you look at the comparables that we met with all of the department heads, we're looking at spending, everybody's getting, like I said, everybody's getting a raise. So we can put the comparables, where were they, where are they, where was the old scale? Some of the complexity is we're going from letters to numbers and things like that. We're also going to have 17 steps. Again, I don't recall, and Director Biebel may remember or know off the top of his head how many steps the DPW group had. Some of the naming conventions have been combined because of the fact that the job duties, again, the employee, and we've said this over and over, and I just want to say it one last time, the employees filled out the job description questionnaires. The department heads and supervisors reviewed those for any missing pieces. When we met with them later and we said, are there any huge discrepancies? Are there concerns? Those were reviewed. We did review those, Caitlin and myself and Michelle from HR Consulting, who's our part-time HR person. She was involved with that. Again, if some of the changes were similar, and depending on how you looked at it, some of it made sense, and we made those adjustments. Some of them, as Director Krieger had said, some of these are Sheboygan adjustments, tweaks as I call them. They're things that are unique to us. And that's where, again, the appeals process needs to be looked at, because we as a city, we as department heads, we need to look at it and say, are those tweaks accurate to the position? As an example, you might have somebody that fills in for something once, twice a year. That doesn't make them a supervisor, but they do step up and they do manage or supervise temporarily. Is that something that means that we move them to another pay grade because they're not doing that job every day? It's one of those things, other duties as assigned. So we can look at these things, but we're also trying to, again, have a base point or a baseline, as I call it, saying this is a good platform to start and move forward, because if we continue to kick this around and try to hit 100%, we're not going to get there, because we're not going to please everyone. And if it goes round and round and round, we're just going to waste time, and we should be trying to take care of our employees first and foremost, and we can adjust it if it makes sense. and the data's there to support it, we should actually be making judgment calls, as I've said in the past, using information so that we know how we made a decision and how that decision was made, win, lose, or draw. At least we understand, and it's not subjective. It's data-driven. Thank you.
Alder Feldy?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Director Biebel. This is hard to do when you have such short notice to do it in. I mean, we get the information, and there are people on the council that have full-time jobs, so, you know, they come home, some of them make supper, some of them, you know, do their daily duties at home, and go to bed because they're exhausted. And we expect them in less than a week's time or a week's time, we expect them to make this decision that affects other people's livelihood. That is something that I really grapple with. So, this is my second round with a wage study, and I didn't like it the first time around. I don't like it this time around. So you probably, you'll get a yay vote today to pass it on to council, but I'll tell you, when I get to council, it'll probably be a nay. Because I've been a worker and I know what it's like. And I know that there are people out there that have worked for the city for many years without a pay raise at all. And I think we're not doing diligence to them to get them their money. But then on the other hand, there's people that, you know, aren't going to go where they want to go. So thank you, David. I'm with you. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, a motion? If there is no further discussion, we'll be looking for a motion to recommend approval to the Common Council.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, then seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye, the ayes have it, and the motion passes. I'd like to thank everybody for a good discussion on this one, and for all the time and effort that's been put into getting it to the point that we have it at now.
Thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Patrick, for calling in.
Thank you. Yep. Have a great evening, everybody.
With that, we're on to item number 7, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye. The ayes have it. The motion passes. We are adjourned.